I think culture kind of in a lot of companies gets dismissed as something like astrology. Okay, like the stars are important. They govern your life, but it's just so mystical and intangible. The reason the CFO is so powerful in most companies is because he or she is working with this really tangible, really important data that doesn't exist for culture, even though culture is arguably in most firms probably their single most important asset. We think about toxic culture as these specific topics. Those are the topics that when employees mention them, it doesn't just have a little impact, it really tanks them. You focus on Netflix and you see what they did to be successful, and then the takeaway is you should be more like Netflix. And that's probably the single biggest problem with cultural thought leadership. But the reality is trying to change the toxic culture from the bottom is like trying to change democracy in the Soviet Union.
Charlie, how you doing?
Doing good, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Glad you're here. I was really excited to see someone posting about the connection between leadership and culture and a lot of different stuff. You had like a whole string of hits on LinkedIn. I don't know, a few weeks ago or so. But let's just start like real short, but intro. Who's Charlie Sull? Who are you?
Well, my name is Charlie Sull, and cultural measurement is my game. So for the past 10 years, I've been researching culture at MIT, and pretty early on in that research, we discovered that the biggest bottleneck to effectively managing culture and improving it is actually understanding what culture is, or in other words, how to measure it. So there are a few reasons for this. The main reason is the way most companies are measuring culture right now is with a very outdated technology that was developed in 1932. So this is the dreaded engagement survey, which I bet a lot of your listeners have taken. And these surveys, they have just dozens of repetitive 1 to 5 scale questions, and they have a number of. Basically, you can't measure culture with them. And one of the reasons for that is when employees are faced with these dozens of repetitive questions, they switch off and they answer almost every question with almost the same answer. So we did a big study of 900,000 employees responding to surveys like these, and we found the average employee answers 90% of questions on an engagement survey with the same 2 answers. And why was this a problem for us? Because if you're trying to measure culture, culture is incredibly rich. Culture is incredibly nuanced. Culture is incredibly multidimensional. It has all these different moving parts. And if you're using this really repetitive data where employees are basically answering almost the same answer to almost every question, you can't measure something that complex. You can measure, yeah.
So then. Two questions come to mind for me, and maybe you were about to go into this. I guess the first one, how do you define culture, and then how have you chosen to measure it?
So we think of culture as a company's operating system. So how people tend to think of culture, at least in HR, not so much in the academic world, but at least in HR, is culture is kind of the employee experience. If you have happy employees, you have a strong culture. If you have unhappy employees, you have a weak culture. And then culture becomes things like, programs to give Dunkin' Donuts gift cards to your fellow employees and ping pong tables and all that stuff. So that's not how we think of it. We think of culture as a company's operating system that's governing thousands and thousands of important decisions in a company. And this encompasses the employee experience. So, for instance, an algorithm that would govern the employee experience is something like, if my direct report does a bad job on a project, is it okay to kind of lose my temper and yell at him, okay, or not? And there are some companies where that's okay and some companies where that's not okay. And you can imagine how that difference in culture would have a huge impact on the employee experience. But culture governs so much more than that. Even things that employees don't really care about too much, or at least doesn't impact their satisfaction too much. So things like innovation or agility. So for instance, another algorithm that culture governs is, say I'm a distributed manager in Sweden, and I noticed there's a changing market condition in Sweden. So the question is, do I respond proactively to that changing market condition and take ownership for it and address the problem myself? Or do I report back to headquarters, wait a couple of weeks for headquarters to consider the situation, then get back to me, and resolve the situation that way? So that's a cultural algorithm around agility. And culture has hundreds of these topics like respect or agility. So anything ranging from cross-unit collaboration to how pet-friendly the organization is, to to inclusion, to execution, to hundreds of these things that culture is impacting. And so the punchline is it's really multidimensional. It's really rich. It has a million different things going on. And to answer the question of how we measure it is natural language. So as I mentioned, these traditional surveys that have really repetitive data, they're just too blunt of an instrument to measure something that nuanced. The technology is 100 years old, but natural language is a sophisticated enough tool to measure all of the complexity and multidimensionality of culture. So how we do it is pretty simple. We just listen to what employees actually say. A lot of our research is listening to what employees say on Glassdoor, which is a tremendous data source and, contrary to popular belief, not negatively biased.
Interesting.
And then we also listen to internal surveys. But basically, the innovation we had was let's measure culture by listening to what employees actually say, by taking into account natural language, and not doing it with this repetitive 1 to 5 scale survey.
Got it. Okay. You've defined what culture is. I love that operating system, and thank you for the examples as well. That was phenomenal. What is a toxic culture?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And if you're, on LinkedIn, you probably see a lot of posts about toxic culture. They're all saying different things. Like some people say that if you're bureaucratic, that means you're a toxic culture, or if you're
Right.
late to meetings, that's a toxic culture. Whatever. It means a million different things to a million different people. But we wanted a really rigorous, evidence-based definition of toxic culture. So the way we did that is we listened to what more than a million employees said on Glassdoor. And on Glassdoor, you have a rating for your company. You have a 1 to 5 point scale rating. And then you also write about things in the free text. You say what you like about your company and what you don't like about your company. And in that free text, employees will speak about hundreds of different cultural topics, anything ranging from cross-unit collaboration to pet friendliness, whatever. And the question we were interested in is which of these topics are demonstrably toxic? And the way we measure that is which of these topics, when mentioned, tend to tank a Glassdoor rating, okay? Because for the vast majority of topics, when employees mention them on Glassdoor, yeah, they say they're going bad, but this doesn't have a huge impact on their overall employer rating. So, for instance, compensation is very frequently mentioned on Glassdoor, and when employees speak about compensation, it has a negative impact on their Glassdoor rating, but it's not a very large one. It tends to decrease their Glassdoor rating by only 0.1 star. However, so we measure hundreds of topics like that, but there are a handful of topics that we consider the toxic topics, and the reason for that is because when employees criticize these topics, it has a huge negative impact on their Glassdoor rating. So it's bringing the Glassdoor rating down by, a full star, like 10 times the average effect. So this is how we think about toxic culture, is these specific topics, and we classify them into something called the Toxic Five, which are disrespectful behavior, abusive behavior, unethical behavior, non-inclusive behavior, and cutthroat competition. And those are the topics that when employees mention them on Glassdoor, it doesn't just have a little impact on their Glassdoor rating, it really tanks them. And you can see this came up in our conversation with Brene Brown, and you can see it just from reading through, tens of thousands of employee comments as I have. when employees mention these topics, it has a visceral negative reaction. They can really feel
Yeah.
it at an emotional level in a very different way than, if they criticize compensation or cross-unit collaboration or any one of the other 100 topics that they mentioned. So that's how we define toxic culture, and that's what's so special about the Toxic Five.
So on that scale of 1 to 5, just how big of an impact are we talking? Like you said, compensation, which a lot of people, that matters a lot to a lot of people. But you said that's actually like a point 0.1 impact when it comes to overall rating. If I view net compensation negatively, yeah, it's not on average. This doesn't actually drop things that much. What are we talking about when it comes to something like cutthroat competition, or some of the other ones that you mentioned?
It's about a 7 to 10 times as powerful of a negative impact.
Wow. So sometimes this is actually like a full point drop and on 1 to 5 scale. When a company has something wrong with it in one of these categories, does it tend also to have things wrong with the other ones? Like, are these linked to each other, or are they independent in the data?
They're not always linked to each other. So in cases where just like everything's going wrong, then it's not uncommon to see all five of the Toxic Five breaking down at once and in very bad cultures. But what's more common, especially in relatively healthy cultures, is for you to just have a problem with, for instance, favoritism, which is an aspect of non inclusive behavior. And
Okay.
for other things to be going fine or even above average. So that's why we classify the Toxic Five into these five bundles because they do tend to be quite distinct unless you have a really toxic culture, in which case you often see many of them breaking down at once.
Got it. Can you give a little bit more definition around you just said like non-inclusiveness, favoritism falls into that bucket. Can you give a little bit of a broader definition of each of the five?
Yeah, so disrespectful behavior is about, it fundamentally comes down to treating people as less than human. So if you read through employee feedback about how they feel disrespected, a very common theme will be, this company treats me like a tool. This company treats me like garbage. This company treats me like a cog in the machine. This company treats me like an animal. I mean, they go into a lot of detail, but that's the core idea. So basically, it's someone is stripping away your human dignity and treating you as less than a human. So that's what's going on with disrespect. With abusive behavior, this is the most kind of classic cartoonish version of toxic culture. So this is just like your manager is yelling at you in the face, things like that. Or your
Yeah.
manager is an extreme bully, kind of a very in-your-face toxic culture. This is actually relatively less discussed compared to the other one. So the kind of cartoon version of toxic culture empirically doesn't actually occur that much, at least compared to things like disrespectful or unethical. Unethical behavior is different than the other kinds of toxic culture. So the other kinds of toxic culture are about treating people badly, essentially. Versus unethical behavior, you're not necessarily treating your coworkers badly, but you're breaking the rules. You're breaking laws, you're breaking regulations, you're committing fraud, things like that. That's basically you're violating a moral code. And then non-inclusive behavior. So this encompasses anything from gender discrimination, racial discrimination, ageism, LGBTQ discrimination. But it also encompasses favoritism, which doesn't necessarily take those forms. This can be things like cliquey behavior, like a high school environment where there are in groups and out groups, and if you're not in the in group, it's you don't get the same development opportunities, and you don't get promoted. Maybe you get paid less. Maybe you get worse schedule shifts. That's kind of how favoritism works, and then it also includes just general non-inclusive behavior that isn't necessarily favoritism, but it's just not a welcoming environment. So
Got it. Okay.
that's a relatively non-inclusive behavior has a lot of different moving parts. And then cutthroat competition, the definition is very clear. So this is when, rather than collaborating with your colleagues or your boss in a healthy way, it's an environment where everyone's kind of out to get each other. So it's healthy competition taken to the extreme where it becomes unhealthy. So it's things like stabbing your fellow employees in the back, doing anything to get ahead, things like that.
Got it. Okay. You said abusive behavior was actually the least common, even though it is the cartoonish stereotype of toxicity.
It's among the least common,
Among the least, okay.
especially explicit behaviors where, comments like, my boss just yelled at me in the face. These happen, but they're much less common than something like disrespect or non-inclusive behavior.
What is that stack from like most common to least common on this? Or roughly, if you don't know exactly.
Yeah, roughly. I mean, it varies in the company, right? Because different companies have different cultural challenges. At the aggregate Glassdoor level, non-inclusive behavior is probably the most common, just because it encompasses so many different things, from racial discrimination to favoritism. Disrespectful behavior is very common among the toxic five. So those are probably the two most common ways that toxic culture breaks down, at least in general. And then abusive behavior is relatively rare. Cutthroat competition across the world is relatively rare, but in certain industries, like the legal industry, it actually becomes one of the most prevalent criticisms. And then similarly, unethical behavior is relatively rare, but there are some industries like finance and also like the retail industry. Unethical behavior is relatively frequent in the retail industry, although it takes a very different kind of form than financial fraud. But if you're looking for the two most common ones, it's probably disrespect and non-inclusive behavior.
So you've been doing this, you said, for a decade, primarily at MIT. Glassdoor is one of the principal sources. What's jumped out to you? Like, what shocked you? Or I don't know, just been like something like, whoa, didn't expect to see that when you started to now.
That's a big question. I mean, there are individual things in the Glassdoor data that are surprising. So, for instance, if you look at Glassdoor data in the financial industry, even about 10 years after the huge Wells Fargo fraud scandal, employees on Glassdoor from Wells Fargo are still about 2 or 3 standard deviations more likely to criticize unethical behavior than in other major banks. So it's like I have a million little things like that. I find those every day. But I would say bigger picture, doing this work for a decade is two things. One, how little most top leaders prioritize culture, how little this is on the agenda, even though when you think back to at least how we think about culture, it's this operating system that's governing countless value creating behaviors. And there's all this research about the financial impact of culture. I mean, the majority of CEOs and CFOs, according to a large really well done Duke study, think that culture is a top 3 driver of financial value creation. There's this great study done by Alex Edmonds, who was at Wharton at the time, that found that a strong culture is associated with the 24% total shareholder return premium over 5 years, which for a big company is tens of billions of dollars. Yeah, it's a huge impact. But what's interesting is, even though on some level everyone's like, oh yeah, culture is important, it's really not prioritized very much at the firm level. And when it is prioritized, employers will think of this mostly as a purely employee experience phenomenon.
Right.
So there's kind of a lack of understanding of what culture even is, and that contributes to the lack of prioritization that you see in most in most companies, especially after the Great Resignation ended, right? So now it's not hard to retain employees anymore, and that was the main reason why a lot of companies were prioritizing culture in the first place. So that reason just completely went away, and now culture is less prioritized than ever. So that was one of the big lessons, and then the second big lesson is this one's more surprising to me. So you had this situation in companies where at least everyone gives nominal lip service to culture. Everyone's like, "Oh yeah, culture, that's important." But even in the biggest, most sophisticated companies in the world, there's very, very basically no understanding of what even their own culture actually is.
Yeah.
And that was fascinating to me when I just when we started doing this, we were like, okay, this will maybe provide some additional insight. Maybe this will help people a little bit. But the more we did this, the more we realized that there's very little understanding of what a company's culture is at the senior level, even the person in charge of employee listening. And a lot of this comes back to a lack of prioritization, and a lot of it also comes back to this outdated instrument that people are using to measure culture. This
Yeah.
100-year-old tool that is still, even in these very sophisticated leading companies, is still how people are doing it. So those would probably be my two big picture surprises.
There's so much came to mind for me. One, I had an experience of working with a company in games, and I was me and my partner were put in touch with their culture leader, and we were like, oh great, he'll talk to us about, and we think about it more in the way that you described, that culture is sort of the summation of behaviors, or you described as the operating system. It's like how do people sort of expect to behave, and what's okay and what's not okay, and all these like norms of behavior type things. Um, and so we sat down. We were like hoping to get some good insight into the culture, and it turned out he was the guy who like scheduled the yearly trip, and he like he made sure that they all like
Yeah.
had the like dinner out some number of times. It was, we were like, okay, I guess that's fine. But to your point, that is still, and this wasn't like a I don't know, some backwards company, right? This was a
Yeah.
modern company trying to do the right thing, and their culture expert was more interested in like planning, a vacation for everybody than they were, well, what's actually going on? Like how does this how does our company culture impact the employees, the outcomes, all these different things. So that's one thing that came to mind for me. You mentioned leadership a lot in there, and you said like leaders aren't taking this seriously, and part of that is because even if you give lip service, you just don't understand your own culture. And the thing I thought about earlier when you mentioned Glassdoor was, well, shoot, if a simple thing you could do is just go read Glassdoor reviews of your company and kind of leave behind the myth that this is bad data or this is negatively biased or whatever, and actually just like just take this seriously. Go read those reviews, and you might have better insight than this old, outdated survey that you've been probably giving your employees once a year for the last who knows how many years. Um, but yeah, I guess like why don't they do that? What stop? Do you know? Have you talked to people about like why don't you take this more seriously or dive into the space of why do we have a toxic culture? Why is it functioning or not?
Yeah, I mean, for me, a lot of it comes back to a lack of effective measurement and a lack of good data. I mean, the reason the CFO is so powerful in most companies is because he or she is, working with this really tangible, really important data that everyone can recognize is measurable and relevant. That doesn't exist for culture, even though culture is arguably in most firms probably their single most important asset. So what doesn't get measured doesn't get acted on, and there's okay, you have this measurement with the traditional 1 to 5 point scale survey, but it's really hard to do anything with that. I mean, it gets acted on a little bit maybe. So there's culture also just has a PR problem. Everyone is if you go on LinkedIn, everyone has an opinion on culture. There are 10,000 armchair opinions about what culture is and what you should do about it, why it matters. Virtually none of them are grounded in any evidence or any credible thinking. And I think culture kind of in a lot of companies gets dismissed as something like astrology. Okay, like the stars are important. They govern
Yeah.
your life, but it's just so mystical and intangible that we can't really do anything about it. So I think part of the solution to getting people to care more about culture is uh, to make it more tangible and to actually bring good data into this equation and to have it be evidence based and to have it be credible. And if you can do that, then you have a better shot of prioritization. But another issue is it's a mindset shift. I mean, if you look at the typical CEO of a company right now is 55 or 60 years old. When they went to business school, there were no classes about culture. Even today, there are very few classes in business school about culture. This just wasn't a part of your training. It's maybe something
Yeah.
you give lip service to, but you're not being trained in it in the same way that you would be trained in, for instance, strategy execution. Um, so it's about overcoming that PR problem, shifting the mindset, making people realize the value of culture and what culture actually is, and injecting this high quality data into the equation so that you can measure this intangible asset just as effectively as you could measure a tangible asset that matters so much.
Love it. Yeah. Okay, so hey, leaders and game devs, if you love what we do here at Building Better Games, imagine what we could create with your support. By joining our Patreon, you help us bring deeper insights, develop better training, and host more expert discussions to level up your leadership and game development skills. Plus, as a patron, you're going to get exclusive behind-the-scenes content, early access to episodes, and a chance to ask your burning questions directly to us. Join now and help us build better games together. I talk to leaders in game development. That's what this podcast is for. My background is military and then game development, so I saw a wide range of cultures between those spaces. What role do leaders play in creating and preventing toxicity?
The top team is everything with the culture. They're the ones who set the tone. They're the only ones in a company with access to all the levers that you would need for culture change, like work design or who to promote or who to fire. Top leadership is the most important level of leadership to manage a culture by far. If they prioritize this and they know how to fix it, then the culture will succeed. If they do not prioritize it and or they don't know how to fix it, then the culture is going to fail. You can't overstate the importance of top leadership. And other levels of leadership matter too, of course, but even those are going to be largely determined. Those social norms and cultural behaviors are going to be largely determined by the example that they see from the top team, and things like what is rewarded by promotion, what's rewarded by compensation. That ultimately the top team is the only ones who are able to control. So really, if you want to change a culture, you only need two things. You need top team prioritization. It has to happen at the very top. And you need knowledge about how to actually improve the culture, which comes back to kind of high quality data and using more sophisticated cultural measurement. But if you don't have top team prioritization, the culture is going to be average at best, and that's the state of culture. That's what you see in the vast majority of companies. Most top teams do not really prioritize this, and as a result, the state of culture is pretty dire. If you look at Glassdoor, which again is not a negatively biased platform, the average employee on Glassdoor is rating their culture 3.5 stars out of 5, right, which is kind of pathetic. And a big reason for this, probably the biggest driver, even more so than lack of effective measurement, is because leaders are simply not prioritizing this at the top.
I'm reminded of a book. Are you familiar with Patrick Lencioni? He did
Uh,
Five Dysfunctions of a Team and some of those other books. He wrote a book called The Advantage. And The Advantage, he talked about the heart and the science side of organizations. And he kind of said a lot of leaders spend a lot of time focusing on the science side of organization, and he defines the science side as all this stuff. As you said this earlier, kind of the CFO has this very tangible thing that's easy to measure, and they end up very powerful in large organizations because it's very obvious what's going on with the thing that they control. Like dollars are moving, and the bank account is going up or down, and the money's going out in various directions or whatever. There's a lot of things that are kind of like that, be a people moving or how many teams do we have or whatever. There's the stuff you can measure very easily. And then he described another half of business, which is the heart side, and culture lives on the heart side. He was sort of saying, look, it's really difficult to measure this side, and so leaders don't focus there because they don't know how to measure it. They don't know how to understand it. But his experience was that leaders that focused on the heart side of the organization tended to get more mileage long term than those who just focused on number crunching, all the things that were obvious. And as you're talking about it, I appreciate that you're kind of saying, look, you can take some of these things that are so difficult to measure, and maybe we can actually measure them. Maybe we can actually get some good data out of this and allow us to make good decisions as senior leaders. And I think also just that idea of, I think a lot of people want to be able to transform them from the ground up. And my experience has been largely that if the top leadership of an organization, the most senior leadership of an organization is not on board, it doesn't matter how much of a grassroots movement you attempt to create. It's not going to prevail in the end. Like the likelihood is so small because, like you said, they don't have the ability to fire or make adjustments or like shift things, that they don't have the right levers. They're just fighting. They're fighting uphill the whole way as they do that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I often, people ask me, I'm in a toxic culture, I'm a mid-level employee, what can I do to change the toxic culture? And the reality is trying to change the toxic culture from the bottom is like trying to change democracy in the Soviet Union. I mean, maybe there are some things you can do like a little bit that on the margin will have some help. You can treat people well, that's always a good idea. But the reality is that the people with the power and the access to all of the levers needed to actually change this are at the very top. The most, we did a big study synthesizing over 1,000 scholarly articles about about toxic culture and what drives it, and the biggest thing by far is top leadership. I mean, if you just don't have that, you can't change it. And I mean, culture is an art and a science, and it always will be. But right now, it's just way too much on the art side, or not even art, because it's not even good art. It's just a lot of nonsense. So what we're trying to do is to bring it a lot more into the science side and to inject some evidence and credibility to this field.
Nice. Okay, there's more questions I want to ask in that, but I want to jump over to the space of game dev. So you're able to compare industries through Glassdoor. You're able to compare companies that are large enough to have a sufficient sample size to each other. I'd love to show this, and for those who are listening, we'll try to like describe a little bit what we're seeing. But I am just curious, how does game dev compare culturally to other industries? Where does it sit? So if you want to go ahead and share your screen, we can take a peek.
Yeah, so one interesting question is how does the video game publishing industry compare to other industries? So these are Glassdoor's industry classifications. They're a little bit messy, but they give you kind of some idea of what's going on in the industry. And so what this chart is showing is the benchmark scores above or below the average industry that tens of thousands of video game employees talk about on Glassdoor. So for instance, the thing that they score really off the charts on, 4.9 standard deviations better than the industry average, is how impressive their colleagues are. Video game employees are very, very enthusiastic about their fellow colleagues. So to describe this chart for someone who's listening to this on audio, how you can visualize textual data is the horizontal axis is the percentage of employees who mention a topic, in this case, impressive colleagues, on Glassdoor. And the vertical axis is when they mention this topic, what percentage of their mentions are favorable. So if they're favorable, they're saying the colleagues are impressive. If they're not favorable, they're saying the colleagues are not impressive.
Got it. Okay.
And you can see that video game publishing employees are off the charts on this. So normally on Glassdoor, employees only mention this about 2% of the time. And when they mention it, they're kind of 50-50. Half the time colleagues are impressive, half the time they're not. But in the video game publishing industry, they're more than twice as likely as average to mention this topic. And when they speak about it, they speak about it very favorably. So they're saying their colleagues are impressive nearly 80% of the time. So that's what really jumps out about the about video games. But there's a lot of, I mean, it looks like there's quite a lot of good stuff. So the green is all the good stuff. These are the areas that employees speak more favorably about than employees from other industries.
Just to run through that, so the impressive colleagues one is huge compared to all the other lines. It's like a 4.9, like you said, 4.9 standard deviations above, and then we jump way down, but still high, 2.8 standard deviations through 2.1 standard deviations above for colleagues, pleasant workplace, perks, general perks, great colleagues, employee engagement. So those tend to be strong in the video game publishing category. And by the way, that video game publishing category, it's not just publishers. That includes like Blizzard and EA and so this isn't, don't think this is just the publishing side of game dev. It's all of game dev. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a lot of data, but if you look big picture, basically the overall cultural state of the video game industry looks pretty strong. So this is just when employees say things like good company culture, team culture is great. So basically when they just speak about the culture in general terms. And on Glassdoor, on average, you talk about that maybe 20% of the time, something like that. And you're pretty favorable. You're favorable about 70% of the time. But in video game publishing, you're talking about it way more frequently. You're talking about it 27% of the time. And you're also way more favorable. When you mention this, you're favorable 80% of the time. So I would say overall, the state of the culture in the video game industry, at least according to what employees say on Glassdoor, is pretty strong. It looks like things like employees are pretty engaged. There's not as much burnout as in other industries. The workload is relatively light compared to other industries. The employers care about employees. So there's a lot of good stuff, and then there's also some bad stuff. So the biggest criticism, and this might not surprise you based on our earlier discussions about video games, is that employees are 3.2 standard deviations more critical than most industries about risk taking. So what they really want is for these video game studios to take more risks and do more creative games. So that's the biggest area below benchmark. Compensation is a big pain point. Fixed compensation is a big pain point, which is kind of relatively common in these creative industries where you're there's so much competition for these jobs, so pay tends to go down. Transparency is actually a big pain point. Gender equity, which is sadly maybe not so surprising, but gender equity in video games on Glassdoor is 3 standard deviations below average. It's basically the worst industry of all the dozens of industries we measure, except for forestry, logging, and timber operations. That's one. That one's a little bit better, but yeah, so that's not good. So overall, the state of the culture in video games, at least according to employees on Glassdoor, is pretty strong, but it lacks risk taking. Compensation is a pain point. There's something going on with transparency that I don't understand. Innovative products similar to risk taking is a pain point. Employees are critical about the strategy. Gender equity I mentioned, cross-unit collaboration is breaking down, feedback is breaking down. So there are a few things to look out for on the industry level too.
What's the one on right above strategy and below strategy general? Is that something leaders? I can't see the whole word.
Yeah, that's just transparent leaders.
Oh, transparent leaders. Okay, so that's transparency. And transparency there is the critique, I assume, is like, hey, I the company's not transparent with what's going on? Does that tend to be what that category captures?
That's normally it. Basically, employees wish that leadership was more transparent about what's going on, and that could also
Got
have
it.
something to do with job security, which has decreased a lot um, in the past couple of years. So in this one, you can see this is how the video game industry has changed between 2023 and 2024, and 2021 and 2022. So a few
Oh,
things have
nice.
gotten better. Online education. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on there, but that's good. More breaks. The products appear to have gotten a little bit more innovative, according to employees on Glassdoor. More experimentation. Better drink perks. That's always good. But on the bottom side, you can see that really the main thing is job security. Job security has just really gone down. 2.4 standard deviations, and execution has decreased a lot. LGBTQ equity has gotten worse for some reason. They're more kind of sycophants and yes men, according to people on Glassdoor.
Yeah.
Expectations are not clear. Um, yeah, so that's how, at least according to, I don't know, tens of thousands
Yeah,
of
and
Glassdoor employees, things have changed.
got it. So that's a drop, and that's again. So this is a drop between video games in 21 and 22, like 2021 and 2022 through 23, 24. This makes a lot of sense. Actually, it's something that you don't think about, but when I look at it and I go, oh right, there's a rise of sycophants as job security goes down. It's like, yep, those things kind of connect.
To answer the question at the start of the podcast, this is how video games compares to other industries for toxic culture, and it's relatively good. It's in pretty good shape. So
Nice.
it's in the green. Basically, employees are criticizing this about 9% of the time. The average is 10%, so that's pretty good. So that doesn't mean that there aren't pockets of toxicity within the industry. So you can see that too. This is showing how some of the largest companies on the industry are talking about it. You can see that at Activision, employees are unusually likely to speak about the toxic culture and speak about it critically, and the same at Blizzard Entertainment, and there are a couple of other ones.
So
Um,
you might not know this, but the three companies, one of which is so we're looking at a chart right now. Again, it has that percentage of employees mentioning on one axis and the percentage of mentions that are favorable on another. And this is the breakdown for toxic culture population. Blizzard, Activision, and King are actually all they actually became like a combined company, and now they're actually combining with Microsoft as well. But so you have, and you can actually see that the Activision Blizzard is also there because that's the combination of those two that happened. They merged some number of years ago. But it's interesting that like yeah that a lot of mentions and not positive mentions at Blizzard, which is one of the titans of our industry. Where at King you see a lot of mentions, though not as many negative, and at Activision, sorry, I'm not meaning to pick on Blizzard. That's just what the data is popping out here. And when you look at that, actually, can we go back to that chart real quick? I just wanted to call out where some of the other companies were.
yeah.
So one of the things that's interesting to me is a company that I think was very well known for having a toxic culture. It was almost famous for this. Was Electronic Arts, and actually, Electronic Arts is not that much like the toxic culture is not mentioned that much, and it's one of the better companies on here. It's one of the only green dots. I would say that. So we have one dark green dot, which is Virtuos, and then there's a couple of light green dots, one of which is Electronic Arts. There's a lot of yellow dots, and I'm assuming that's just about average. And there's things like Rockstar, Nintendo, PlayStation, Ubisoft, King, and then you have some orange dots, interestingly, Riot and Epic and Activision are there, and then you have one dark red dot, which is Blizzard, on this chart, and it's I don't know, it's again it defies maybe what you would have expected based on the stereotype or the myth around some of these companies. I would have expected Electronic Arts to actually not have as strong a culture, but they're one of the better ones according to this in terms of not having a very toxic culture.
Yeah, if you look at Electronic Arts, at least what employees say about it online, things are pretty good. It's relatively inclusive. LGBTQ equity is going good. Diversity is going good. Favoritism's going good. Everything's going pretty well, at least according um, to employees on
Yeah.
Glassdoor. So it looks like,
And
at least from this data, that they took that criticism in hand and actually did something about it.
yeah, I see decent ethical score. And favoritism being good means that there's not as much favoritism, correct?
Yeah, a positive score is always good news.
Yeah. Um, so that's pretty cool. This is a podcast for leaders in game development, leaders at all layers. So some of them are senior leaders, some of them want to become leaders, some of them are leading teams or middle managers. You said earlier, look, there's, if you're a lead on a team in a company of 50 teams, the odds of you transforming the culture are very, very low. Simultaneously, what are the things that leaders should know about transforming culture and how to go about doing that so that if they do end up in those senior leadership roles and they do end up with access to those levers, like what is it that you would want them to know to have that positive impact on their culture?
It comes back to this very simple kind of mantra that I have, which is if you want to improve a culture, you only need two things. You only need will and you only need knowledge. So if a leader wants to manage the culture, they need to understand what culture is, why it's important, and they have to be committed to changing it. And that sounds very simple. It is simple, but in the vast majority of companies, that is not what's happening. So, if you're a leader who's interested in this and you're working your way up the ladder, I can recommend some books. I'd recommend Amy Edmondson, Charles O'Reilly. I'd recommend our own stuff. Just understanding what culture is and why it matters, so that you can believe in your heart and in your brain that culture is something worth prioritizing, and so you can prioritize it. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, once you actually have committed to improving culture, you need to know what your culture actually is and what are the high impact tangible steps you need to actually take to improve the culture. So this comes back to having knowledge, to having high quality data. And this is a little bit more of a technical problem. And basically what we would argue here is the main thing to do is measure your culture the right way. So measure your culture with AI. Don't use what every company is doing right now. Don't do it. Don't use one of these lengthy 1 to 5 point scale surveys that was developed in 1932. That's not going to make your culture any better. In 2025, we have CultureX, but we also have large language models in general. It's become much, much easier for anyone, whether you use CultureX or not, to leverage AI to effectively measure culture. And from a knowledge perspective, that's the most important thing you can do. So really, you just need will and you need knowledge.
And I think also what I'm hearing you calling out there is, look, there's not one solution to culture because there's like hundreds of categories, and you need to address the ones that you're weak on to improve your culture. And especially if you have those the toxic five, right? If you have any of the toxic five, maybe that's a higher priority thing because those have a larger negative impact on your culture than anything else. But you need to go get the data about your specific company, because if you spend all your time trying to remove disrespect because that was one of, or you, let's say you focus all your time on all five of those when only one of them was a problem, you're probably wasting a lot of time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's probably the single biggest problem with cultural thought leadership right now. The vast majority of it is one size fits all. You focus on Netflix and you see what they did to be successful, and then the takeaway is you should be more like Netflix. Whereas the reality is what you should do to improve culture is going to be determined largely by your context, by your strategy, by your industry, by the people you have on your team to some extent. Culture is not one size fits all. And that's why measurement is such an important part of it, to understand what your exact situation is and the exact tailored steps that you need to take to improve it. Because if you're just reading a book about what worked for some other company, maybe that'll be kind of helpful, but it's probably not going to be the same context that your company is facing.
Cool. All right. I want to be respectful of time. We are almost out of it. Where should people go to check out more about you, about CultureX, or about culture in general?
We've got a new podcast series, an MIT Slow Management Review series called Culture Champions. So the premise of this series is that the vast majority of companies do not prioritize culture. However, there are some that do and create really strong cultures. However, a lot of those cultures are not financially successful. But there are some companies that are both very financially successful and have very strong cultures. And that those are what we call the culture champions. And in this series, we interview the CEOs and CHROs of companies like Hermes, HubSpot, the Lego Group, Cummins, Ferrari is going to be up next. A lot of these really interesting companies. And we learn basically what they think about culture, how they were able to be both financially successful and create great cultures. And they're really interesting discussions. So I'd encourage you to check that out.
This is a trap question to ask so late in the podcast, but you just kind of you opened the door here. Is culture positively or negatively correlated with company success?
With financial success, it depends what dimension of culture, but broadly speaking, yes, definitely, it's an incredibly
Positively.
important yes, positively, it's an incredibly
I remember.
important
I remember you
factor.
mentioned that earlier. You said there was like a 23%, positive sort of stock impact or stock price impact.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's what we're working on right now. Actually, that research should be published later this year. But basically, if you look at some cultural dimensions like ownership, the total shareholder returns premiums are outstanding. If you have a culture of strong ownership compared to a culture of weak ownership, according to what employees say on Glassdoor, that results in an annual TSR premium of something like 8 or 9%. I mean, it's billions of dollars for
Wow.
these companies. It's crazy.
Wow. Okay. All right. We're right up at time. We'll put some of the links to what you've got. I'll ping you about them. Just send me the links to any like of the books or that podcast. Anything else you want to close with?
Culture matters.
Cool. Thank you, Charlie. This has been awesome. I really appreciate you breaking it down for us.
Likewise. Thanks for having me, Ben.
All right. I'll see you later. Let's do a quick recap of what we just covered in that episode. Really like this one. First, most companies don't understand their own culture, and they don't have any reasonable way to measure it, with the 1 to 5 scales often being used, not really being a great option. This makes cultural improvement difficult from the outset. Second, culture is not how happy employees are or what perks you give to your developers. It's an operating system that defines what is and is not okay within the organization. It is multidimensional. Simplify it at your peril. Third, practically the things that cause employees to rate your company more negatively than anything else are disrespectful behavior, cutthroat competition, unethical behavior, non-inclusive behavior, and abusive behavior. If any of these things are present in your company, that's a major problem. These are the toxic 5. Fourth, culture has a large impact on the success of a company, at least over the long term. Simultaneously, most leaders don't really take it seriously, even if they claim that they care. There's a lot of lip service, but little action, perhaps because most don't really know what to do. Fifth, many of the leaders at the most senior layers of our organization never received any training in culture. They may have gotten a ton in strategy and operations, but for culture, it's a blank. This is a serious problem because those top leaders are the main thing that can change cultures for the better. Sixth, bottom-up cultural change is not a reasonable expectation for any company. You need those top leaders engaged, and they have to know what to do. If you're some random middle manager or team lead, there might not be that much you can actually do. I know that's disheartening, but it may be true. Seventh, game dev actually has a generally strong culture when we pull the aggregate data. There are some issues in there, but it tends to be pretty good, with a very high opinion of our coworkers being prevalent across. Now, obviously, this will vary company to company, but broadly, the thing most people in game development are dissatisfied with is the lack of risk-taking by their companies. Eighth, some of our stereotypes of the best studios in game dev don't play out when it comes to how toxic cultures are. There are standouts culturally that you wouldn't expect to actually be doing as well as they are, and also some that we revere that seem to be facing massive struggles around culture. Ninth, culture is something worth prioritizing. If and when you do that, now you can do the study to understand your own culture and the ways to improve it. You need that will, and then you need the knowledge. It's not as simple as copying someone else's great culture. You are in a unique situation and need to respect that.